attendance at churches has gone down. We recognize that, but are we tracking that? Or, for example, a couple of people noticed some statistics in local Catholic churches where they're actually increasing. So are we simply reflecting the national trend, or is there something we can do to do that increase?
All right, well, I was an impromptu choice for a leader at this table. So I came to it somewhat reluctantly as well as speaking, but here we go. So our table echoed a lot of the comments that were stated previously from other tables, although we did sort of spend a little time historically talking about the historical record of what this church has had to do to make up for shortfalls in the operating budget over previous years, like selling property or relying on bequests, both of which are somewhat chancy, especially after you've sold off all your assets and then you look around and say, who's going to die next? I'm absolutely serious. So my apologies to people who have lost family members within the last few years and made generous bequests to this church. But you can't keep waiting for the next generous parishioner to pass on to pay for the steeple and the organ. That's a very sad fact. One thing that we thought maybe should have been included in this report was the balance sheet. And I don't know if we have financials for year-end 2019 completely. Okay, good, because if you don't have the balance sheet to go along with the operating budget, then you don't have a clear picture of the health of this parish. And you also don't know that, well, some things were paid out of this account and some things were paid out of that account, and the principal on the mortgage is paid over here, not in the operating budget. So you really, for a full picture, need to see the balance sheet as well as what's going on in operations. And then another point of confusion was over fundraising, because the vestry has some responsibility for fundraising. But then there's also fundraising done in other parts of our ministries, particularly St. Mary's. And that's not really reflected here because our money shows up on the balance sheet. It doesn't show up in the operating budget. And then also here under capital improvements, there's a reference to things that were paid for by bequests, contributions, in St. Mary's. But we don't really see how that factors in. So a little bit more detail in the reporting would have been nice, although we know from previous years that if you put too many numbers up on the screen, that after a while they just kind of go like this, and then everybody walks out and forgets them. So with that happy note.
Thank you.
Oh, it's you.
So I get to follow my wife. So our table, other than what you've already heard, I'll just talk on some of the stuff that you may not have heard. There was interesting thought on the fact that we classify our diocesan pledge as outreach. And so that makes outreach look a little skewed when you consider that if you take out the $173,000 that we put in to the diocesan pledge, outreach is, in the order of about $10,000. And so maybe talk about reclassifying that, although I said that, well, that's the way we've always done things. It's a typical Episcopal answer. People were also, from an affirmation standpoint, happy to see that we are working hard on classifying and separately accounting for the capital stuff. Before we kind of all put that together, we did have a capital budget in the past, but it sort of was not intentional, but people never really saw it. So we're being really intentional, and people are happy about that. They also thought it was affirming that we're breaking out our finances, like what Marie has. Well, of course, that's the personnel, but breaking out things by virtue of ministry area. And actually, this year you saw in the report that we've broken things out by the new ministry areas that we've talked about in the report. And we haven't done that in the way we're doing accounting. We're still trying to work that way, but people felt like that was affirming. We're happy to see that. And finally, given that we had 2 people at our table from stewardship, the general belief is that stewardship feels put upon is a strong word, but feels a little frustrated by the fact that when the vestry doesn't do a $30,000 fundraiser, people blame stewardship. That's the fact. So I mean, so we need to work a little bit more intentionally on who owns what aspect of fundraising, and generally a belief, and you'll see this I think when she does the 2020 budget, is that we're relying too much on fundraising to fill the gaps. Last year we had a $30,000 fundraiser, we made 5, and that was Resilient Women. And this year, we were more intentional about not putting a fundraiser in there that we probably weren't going to do. So one of the things we need to do is figure out, and I've heard this consistently, is what are we doing about fundraising, and how does that affect what we're doing? And that's it.
Thank you.
You can take that to the next table, and I'll share real quick.
Okay.
So from this table, a lot of the similar challenges, pledge shortfall, optional clarity around envelopes, fundraising, rentals. Ultimately, the challenge that we see going forward is how can our leadership discern the potential for sources of income and what that could look like. And then the affirmations were really that we have financial stability. We have a butt ton of money. And our leadership has been very nimble in responding to those shortfalls as they've been coming up. And so we lifted those up as our affirmations.
Some of our conversation evolved around the angst that a faith budget creates. That hadn't been mentioned yet. And then the other thing we haven't talked about is communication has always been a challenge here. So we're looking with the appointment of Melissa to our staff, that the communication then will be able to be more solidified so things don't fall through the cracks. And I would just also add that outreach increase was a major part of our conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, thank you. We got everybody. I'm going to bring the microphone back up front. I just want to name that we are not doing a very good job at budgeting our time this morning because we want to make sure that you all are participating and having these conversations. So I am going to make a slight... Oh, good. I will defer to you all to discuss your time adjustments.
What we're going to do is we are going to file ahead to proposing our 2020 budget part, and then we'll take a short break after that, a short stretch break. But if you need to just like stand up or refresh yourself, that's fine. There are other fruit and other options that are in the fridge that were overlooked that are now out. So as you need, use the restroom or stand. But we're going to plow ahead towards the 2020 budget and looking forward, and then we'll take a formal break and then do the visioning process.
So, thank you everyone. Welcome back. This portion focuses on the 2020 budget. Financial goals. So, yes, I'm going to hold it here. I'm sorry. I'll keep it here. So, Budget and Finance Committee spent some time this second half of the year really thinking about what the financial goals for the church should be. And 5 were identified. To increase the contributions to Plate and Pledge. For a congregation our size, Plate and Pledge should be around $700,000. And we are sitting consistently around $500,000. And then this year we didn't quite meet where we were expected to be. So our goal is to get to $700,000 in the next 4 to 5 years for Plate and Pledge. That means increasing Pledge and Plate $50,000 each year, which is an 8% increase in our pledging. The next thing was to reduce the need to draw from the endowment to meet our minimum operating needs. to bring it from 6%, where the draw has been for the last 2 years, to down to 4% by the time we get to 5 years out. And so that it's a more sustainable distribution. We have been very, very fortunate recently that the endowment has done very well and the stock market has done very well, but we all know that that can change. And right now, our endowment pays for 33% of our budget. So if there's a change that affects our ability to draw at 6%, we might not be able to meet the needs of our church financially to continue regular operations. So we want to kind of ease our dependency on the endowment draw for our regular operations of the church. We also want to reduce our liabilities. So in the last strategic plan back in 2007, there was a goal to pay off all of our debt by 2011. It is 2020, and we still have one piece of debt, which is the mortgage on this building that we're in right now. And the balance of the principal on that mortgage as of December 31st was $265,000 and some. So our goal is in the next 4 to 5 years to pay that off. We also, with the aging of our buildings, we have 3 buildings. Some are hundreds of years old. And as we all know, the costs are just going to continue to increase. What I've asked from Budget and Finance as well as the vestry is that we start thinking of the building like we think of our staff and our people. So we need to be willing and able and ready to increase what we're contributing for capital improvement funds every year to include at least a 3% increase to what we are trying to put aside for future capital expenses. Currently going into 2020, Buildings and Grounds have identified $380,000 of known capital expenditures that need to be taken care of as of now. This budget focuses on $300,000 of that. And we'll get to that in the next few slides. The fourth goal is to increase the capital improvement funds and create a sustainable source of income. And from our discussions, it sounds like you all agree that that needs to be done. And most importantly, what any Budget and Finance Committee wants is a balanced budget. But we want to balance the budget while encouraging and supporting the growth of our congregation and the ministry work that's being done here and that we are called to do. Next slide. Okay, so this might not be appropriately named, but this all stems, this is the strategy kind of going forward and how we're going to be accomplishing those 5 goals. I know it's a lot of information and it's a little hard to read. However, it will be on our website so that you can review it further at a later point. So as far as focusing on increasing our pledge, our goal for 2020 is actually to increase our pledge a little over 50 at $60,000, but that is to make sure that we are able to cover our current operating liability that we have for this year, including as well the capital expenditures that we know we need to take care of this year. Following this, we will actually be able to successfully reach $700,000 in pledge and plate if we actually can continue to meet that $50,000 increase each year by 2023. To reduce the endowment draw this year, because of our current liability needs, our outstanding liabilities, we are keeping the endowment draw at 6%. But the aim is to decrease it by 0.5% each year for the next 5 years so that in 2024 we will reach 4% draw on the endowment. This is a more sustainable drawing percent, and it allows for stability during the fluctuating markets. The current budget as proposed would actually pay off our PNC loan this year. And again, I have an asterisk there, and I'll explain that more as we go on. There are one of the revenue streams aimed at paying off this mortgage is dependent on grant funds for capital improvement. So if, grants are not always guaranteed. So the asterisk is there, and there are contingency plans for 2020 if we do not get the grant that we are currently applying for. We need to increase the capital funds. In the first 2 years, we plan on covering $300,000 worth of capital expense immediately, which make up the slate roof that needs to be done, as well as the retaining wall, it's a wall outside, and a couple other items that will be covered in the junior warden's report. And in doing that, we will actually be able to start seeing a surplus at year end in the capital improvement fund by 2022. So all of these years, we will actually be able to cover the currently anticipated capital improvement expenses through those funds. And then starting in 2022, we'll actually have more than we project needing at this point in time. And starting this year, we plan on having a balanced budget. And a part of that, balancing the budget, is not just having it balanced for this year, but taking care of that, what is formerly known as the faith budget, or that deficit carryover. So the surplus from this year and 21 will go towards paying down or closing out that deficit carryover, so that we will have a balanced carryover. There will be no more faith budget deficit hanging around as of 2022 with this plan. So that's what all the little awards are for, by the way. Next slide, please. Okay. So this is the budget that has been voted on by the vestry, that was presented to the vestry 2 weeks ago and was approved. The income for this just focuses. Page 25, please. Thank you. Thank you, Mother Adrian. So again, I stuck with the 6 buckets because I like buckets, and I think that's easier to understand. The regular budget is just all the accounts, and it's a little overwhelming. So plate and pledge for this year is based on increasing stewardship, increasing our pledge, $60,000 as from what we currently have received so far. And that would be $560,000, $128. The use of facilities to have that income at least be $34,000, which is an increase from what we were able to do this year. However, the staff, as well as different ministry areas, are working towards reevaluating the pricing that we have for our rentals, reevaluating the marketing that we are doing for the rental of this facility, and other ways that we can generate funds for the use of the facility. Other offerings are set at just under $25,000. The investment income is endowment plus our trust income, and that would be the investment the endowment draw would still hold at 6% for this year, and plus the trust income, that would put us at $317,000 and change. Fundraising, based on this last year, we decided that it was not a wise decision to continue to rely on fundraising to make up the difference that we need in our budget. It's important that everyone understand that this is how much it takes to operate the church as it is now, and to operate in a way that promotes growth. So fundraising goal was $5,000. I'm not entirely sure if we're doing Resilient Women this year, but we will find out. It looks like I'm getting a no. So anybody with awesome fundraising ideas, we have a $5,000 very manageable fundraising goal. And then other income, that again is from gourmet night, which I guess is not entirely fundraising because it's to cover the cost of the event, but also the income from credit card points and things like that that we get. Next slide, please. So our expenses, again, were in the 6 ministry areas, and they will focus on, this meshes personnel with other expenditures. So these numbers are total expenditure by ministry area. So $209,018 would be going towards worship and prayer. Study and learning would be $51,000. Action would be $210,000. Life and community would be approximately $47,000. Pastoral care, approximately $49,000. And governance would be still one of the highest areas because it includes repair and maintenance, all the utilities, as well as the staffing to take care of it at $362,000. Next slide, please. So what does that mean for our carry forward deficit? This is the deficit we're coming into 2020 with, this $45,000. That's the carry forward from 18, 17, and 16. And next slide. Oh, I apologize. I have one other note I have to. Okay, at the end of this year, the carry forward is approximately $26,000 based on the surplus that's anticipated. The surplus anticipated right now is currently a little over $15,000 with this budget. So this is kind of, we wanted to be more visual for you guys. It's hard seeing those long sheets with like little things. This might be challenging for some more analytical folks, but it's kind of showing you the buckets of our revenue, the operating side, as well as the capital expense side. I know there was a comment about not really kind of seeing those other accounts on the balance sheet. The two that are kind of dealt with the most are our operating and our capital improvement fund. So the blue boxes, not the cloud, but the blue boxes, those are our sources of revenue that we are pulling from to fund the 2020 budget, primarily. So contributions are at $560,000, other income at $70,000. Our operating expense is anticipated at $928,000 with a 6% draw. That 6% draw will be approximately $313,000. To take care of two of the items that we wanted to focus on in 2020, which is paying off the debt and covering $300,000 of capital improvement expenses, this is how we're hoping to cover those expenses. We are applying for a grant. It's not exactly $100,000, which I found out yesterday, but it's just a little shy of that. And then we have a generous donor who's willing to provide a matching funds up to $50,000 that would be based on that additional contribution into pledge that we were hoping to have. And then we are calling for, the vestry did vote and approve an additional draw from the endowment of $159,000. This is coming from the interest, not from the principal. And we are very fortunate that we currently have the Owens estate, which was $205,000 that we would be applying to covering these capital improvement. Sorry, to the mortgage. So I apologize. To this capital side of issues. So the idea is that part of the operating budget as well as the Owings estate would pay off the mortgage. The reason this number is different is because the operating portion is already in the budget in the operating side, if that makes sense. And then the capital improvements would be taken care of by the grant, the donor, and the endowment. The analogy that we kind of used in this conversation as we went through this is that think of it like a parent and a kid with a car. So the parent pays for the upkeep of the car, but the kid's got to put the gas in it. So we are trying to get to a point where the congregation is putting the funds into the regular operation so that the church can function in that year and not having them give their pledge for a partial operation of the car and then, oh yeah, we need you to pay for new tires as well. So that is kind of how we are trying to handle this. Can I get the next slide, please? Okay, so in the 5 years, this is more of a breakdown of income, anticipated income, the expense. It shows, what page is that on? On page 26. I apologize that that image is not as nice as it could be. There was some formatting issues. But again, this will be available online for further review. So in this, using 2020 as the kickoff into this strategy, this is what it will look like as far as what money will be coming in, what the goals are for that, potentially. Obviously, years 2, 3, 4, and 5 have not been approved yet by vestry, but it gives us a guiding pathway to how we can accomplish the 5 goals that were identified. So, next slide, please. You guys can't see this right now, so I'm not gonna waste your time on it. Next slide. So, for the projected 5-year outcomes, Pledge and Plate, we would be able to exceed our goal of making $700,000 to Pledge and Plate by increasing Pledge and Plate $260,000. Endowment draw, we'd be able to reduce our endowment draw from 6% to 4%. Liabilities, we would pay off all of our debt and we would be debt-free at the end of 2020, assuming the grant comes through. Next slide. And then the Capital Improvement Fund, we'd actually be able to cover anticipated capital expenses over the next 5 years, and we'll be able to set aside a surplus of funds for future capital improvement expenses. And the anticipated balance at the end of 5 years after covering all of our anticipated capital expenses would be $60,000 of seed fund for future capital expenses. So we'd actually have money in that account. And we'd be able to balance the budget this year. And we will also be able to balance the deficit cover carry over by 2022. Next slide, please. Sorry if I'm going too fast. We also have a breakout to go. So there's a contingency plan because grants are not guaranteed. And in the case that we do not get the grant, we will not pay off the mortgage ahead of time. If we do that, if that's the option we have to go with, we will still be able to start seed funds for the Capital Improvement Fund to continue to cover the anticipated cost over the next 5 years for capital improvement. And then we'd also have the endowment draw and the Owens estate, as well as the donor possibly would be willing to continue to offer that to us to continue to support the Capital Improvement Fund. Next slide, please. This is the same breakout for you. You can refer to that in the future. Next slide. So on the contingency plan, we'd still be able to meet our Pledge and Plate goal. We would be able to reduce our endowment draw to 4.5%, and the anticipated payoff of the debt would be November of 2025. So that's 6 years, and which is fine. It does go against our theology of money and wanting to get rid of our debt. There's also there's an economic side of things, but there's also the emotional weight that many of the parishioners have expressed of having debt and not fulfilling the strategy that we set out on in 2007. Next slide. The capital improvement funds, we would be able to cover anticipated capital expenses over the next 5 years, and we'd also be able to still have money set aside for future, and we'd actually have slightly more in that balance, a little over $61,000, and then we'd be able to balance the budget this year and continue to pay off the deficit carry forward by 2022. Next slide. Next slide. Oh, okay. So here comes the fun part. So I realized how much I didn't know coming in about what the state of pledging was here. And so I wanted us to kind of understand where we were for 2020, I apologize. As of the making of this presentation, we were at 181 pledges. And this is the general composition of those pledges. So the largest percentage of pledges are between $500 and $1,500. That's normal. That's and the most consistent, most frequent pledging level is $1,200. But I think a lot of people are hesitant to pledge. I know our family was hesitant to make a promise we couldn't keep. And we thought we had to be at $1,200. And thanks to lots of conversations, we knew we were told we didn't have to, and that there are other ways to come and start to give. Just so you guys have a broader understanding, our lowest annual contribution, our pledge for this year is $100, and that is extremely helpful for us to be able to plan that if someone can make a $100 pledge and keep their $100 pledge, that's more meaningful. The highest is also $14,400. So some people are very generous with their resources, and I think there's some of the reason we don't have as high a pledging as we could have is that people don't realize how easy it is, and we are trying to improve the ease at which you can pledge and take away any stigma or self-shame that people might be putting on themselves because they can't give at a certain level they think they should be able to give at. Next slide. So, my challenge and our challenge this year to be able to continue with fulfilling these 5 goals is to, in the first year, this year for 2020, increase pledge and plate $60,000. This is how we could do it. And I just wanted to present this information in a way that made it more palatable for folks who maybe haven't given. And I don't want people who have been giving consistently or have increased their pledge this year to feel that this is on you. This is for everyone's information, because a lot of people just don't know what the pledge breakdown really is. We traditionally focus on average pledge. Well, the average pledge around here is over $2,000, but that's not the most frequent pledge. So it's really misleading as a parishioner to hear, well, the average pledge is over $2,000. So for folks who can't give at that level, it seems inaccessible and like, well, my little bit of money is not going to be helpful. So I wanted to break this out in a way that made it people see how we could raise this $60,000 from folks who maybe haven't renewed their pledge this year, or folks who've never pledged before, as well as those who maybe reduced it for whatever reason. Maybe it's because they have economic challenges right now, their financial situation's changed, or maybe it's because they weren't sure what we were doing with the finances. They wanted to know what the strategy was. And so we're trying to provide this information to you so that you can see what our strategy is, that we have a strategy going forward, but also that there's many points at which you could give to help us meet this goal. So we only need 65 additional pledges, which is a lot, but still not half of what has already happened. We also had 38 pledges from last year that did not pledge this year. Some of that's death and moving, but some have decided not to pledge, or maybe they just haven't gotten to it yet. But they could help us achieve this goal, even if it's just 10 of them who maybe haven't pledged yet. They could make a big difference in this. So to do this, we only need 65. 30 people or families giving at $1 a day, which is $366 this year because it's a leap year. I like to be exact. And then 25 giving $1,000 for the year, which equates to $3 a day. That's cheaper than most cups of coffee. 6 people giving at 2020. Yeah, you like that? Which is $6 a day. And 4 people being exceedingly generous, but also not straying very far from the trend in pledging here at our church at $3,000. And that equates to $8 a day. And in that, we'd actually be able to surpass our goal of $60,000 and get to $60,100. So next slide. So in my discussions through the visioning process and my discussions with budget and finance and vestry throughout the last 8 months, it became clear that people don't know what they don't know, and we could be doing such a better job at letting the congregation know where we are financially on a more regular basis. So starting next Sunday, we will have weekly pledge updates in the bulletins, but they'll also be going out on the highlights for the week. So we'll be able to see our progress in not only keeping our promises that we've already made, but seeing how we are at reaching our $60,000 increase challenge. And quarterly, we will now start making available on the All Saints website our quarterly financial reports, as well as we will be notifying the congregation when those will be available via the Saints Alive and the weekly email. And we will probably touch on this a little bit more, but we are also going to be instituting a quarterly executive tea. So what does that even mean? So that means that the executive committee and members of the vestry will hold a tea time. We'll have some tea and maybe some light refreshments, and it's an opportunity for members of the congregation to gather, discuss questions, bring up concerns, as well as a chance for them to share their hopes and dreams for the church, kind of like what we're doing in these breakout sessions during the financial presentation. We want to encourage more conversation about this. I think that will help people continue to feel comfortable giving, but also feel heard. And for me, that's extremely important. I am here to help make sure that we are funding and spending the money in a way that is being a good steward to the mission that we're called to do. So we're going to break out into another session, or we're taking a break. We're going to take a break? We're going to break out. Okay, we're going to break out first?
Just about 5 minutes to talk through your groups and really focus on what feelings or observations do you have for this 5-year plan that is being proposed, and does that feel feasible to you? So what feelings and observations do you have? And if you can have a scribe at the table write down the feelings and observations on the note card, and then we're going to collect the note card, and we'll consolidate that, and then share that back to the larger group. So after we do this, we'll take a break. So we're about 6 minutes out from break.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Attention, please. All right. So we don't get white smoke like they do in the Vatican, but we do, however, have 5 new members of the vestry, and this is in alphabetical order. Jill Browning, Steve Crum, Dan Hubner, Lorraine Cattori, and Rosie Russo. Congratulations.
Okay, hi. This is going to be very brief because a lot of what I had to say sorry. Okay, this is going to be pretty brief because a lot of what I have to say has already been said. So just a quick, kind of taking a look back at 2019, some of the accomplishments. First of all, I want to thank Bill Gibb for his leadership over the last couple of years. And also want to thank Jay Colley as well, because Jay, as the Facilities and Events Coordinator, has done an amazing job, has gotten so very much accomplished in his short time here, and I think he's just getting started. So thanks to both of them. So looking back, some of the things that were accomplished last year, the parish hall was renovated. It looks amazing. All the HVAC systems were evaluated, deemed to be, at this time, in good working order. The sacristy area was renovated, including new lighting and a new roof over the sacristy. And the chapel renovations are nearly complete. In fact, I'm told that I think the healing service will be healing service Wednesday in the chapel? Great. Again, thanks to Bill and Jay for all their time and talent in those projects. Looking ahead, we know there's still a lot of work to be done, and so just quickly, what we have in store for 2020, we've talked about the roof. So the roof over the historic church will be replaced this year, and as I'm talking, you can see there's some photos of the roof in its present condition, and so for anyone who's not convinced that we need a new roof, some of these pictures ought to just tell the story. Just like Spider-Man. No, we were very fortunate to be able to find someone who had a drone and was willing to come out and get that drone up there and take these pictures. There's also a video too, if anybody wants to see it at some point. So the roof will be replaced this year. As Marie talked about, we are applying for a grant to help offset the cost of the roof. We are applying for just under $90,000. The application is about complete and ready to be sent off. We think we've put together a really good grant application. So we need your prayers that will come through. We will not know, just so everybody knows, we will not know until July 9th whether or not the grant is going to come through. Also on tap for 2020, the Patrick Street entrance foyer is going to undergo a makeover. The office area is going to be painted. We're going to make that a more inviting and vibrant space. And we're also looking into how we can make the church more accessible to folks with physical disabilities. I can't say that there will be something concrete done on that in 2020, but we are definitely looking into some things that will help people with physical disabilities get around the campus a little easier. In the visioning conversations that have taken place, some of the priorities you conveyed to church, we're taking care of our facility and establishing a financial plan to take care of our ongoing capital needs. So we are working on a plan to put in place a capital improvements fund that would be used for ongoing capital needs. So we want to try to get us started with some seed funds and just try to build this up over the next couple of years so that when an HVAC system goes down and we need to have $20,000, if we've got this capital improvement fund in place, that money is there and we don't have to, it's not like we're trying to get away from always putting out fires. So being proactive instead of being reactive. So I think with proper financial planning and generous stewardship together, I think we can make this happen. I'm excited to be in this new role. I thank Mother Adrian and Mark Gibson for putting me in this place, and I'm looking forward to working with everybody. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I really appreciate it. Marie is getting a few hard copies right now for people who want to walk away with those handouts, this PowerPoint, and then we can always get you a hard copy otherwise later. We do want to recognize our outgoing vestry members, our 4 outgoing vestry members. If you are here, please stand. We helped, well, I mean, 3 of them are here. I know Annette is not available. Thank you for your service. And we also want to recognize our executive team, Mark as our senior warden, Tommy as our senior librarian, Tina, our registrar, and of course, Maria, our secretary, working on this project. At this point, we are going to go ahead and Mother Adrian is going to talk about our vision process. And while this is being presented, we are compiling those note cards, and then we'll present back at the end of that vision process. We'll talk about these are the main themes that have come up in those table conversations for our projected 5-year plan in 2027.
Okay, good.
Where is that? Is that on the computer?
Well, it is, but I don't think, we're kind of, in the interest of time, we're just going to kind of
So
go
we're
through
going
this.
to invite you to turn to page 27.
Okay, so we know that we're at 11:30, so we're about a half an hour over time. I don't want to short shrift this, but I also want to recognize we've been in a meeting for 3 hours, and so before I
Not yet 3 hours.
will have been, so thank you to everybody for giving up a Saturday morning for coming in. You know, it's I know what that's like, so thank you. You've heard it from what Mother Adrian has said and others that we embarked on a visioning process. Actually, we began in the summer in earnest. And so, you know, but want to give you a little background and then kind of do a little bit of brief on what we've done so far. Maybe it's helpful to know why we did this. There was some maybe misinformation early on that we did this to presage a capital campaign, and that's not true. What we did was we felt like it was time for us, as we sort of embark on a new era, to begin to, first of all and primarily, reinforce the relationships that we have within the church, reinforce and build new. And then also within the All Saints community and then within the Frederick community proper. And so that was really the primary reason that we embarked on this capital campaign, on this visioning process, was to establish relationships and in so doing, check each other with where we are in that process. So what we've done, and then we hired a consultant to do that because we wanted to have somebody help us run this that was not involved in the outcome. That's the wise thing to do, is to bring in an expert to do that. And so we brought in the James Company, and Rachel Cornwell is our consultant. And those of you that were in church a couple weeks ago heard her preach, because she's an ordained Methodist minister. And I really like working with her, and she's really done a fine job. So that's the primary reason that we've done this, is to just begin to look at how to reestablish relationships in the context of community development, both developing in the community within All Saints and the community within Frederick. You want to add anything?
My background in previous parishes is really doing community organizing, and that work requires relationships. And I really believe that churches are, at heart, a collection of relationships. This is an affiliative organization. If you come or leave, it is entirely because of your relationship to the organization and to each other. And so at the heart of that, other tactics that sometimes get used, like guilt, shame, those kinds of things, I don't find particularly effective whenever you're trying to chart a course to the future. And so relationships are our capital. It's what we need to invest in. And it's not just relationships with the clergy, it's relationships with each other. And so in my read of what's in the heart of this place and the tuning fork, that rings true here is how much you love each other, how much you love God, and how much you want to be a whole, healthy community. And your relationship with your clergy over generations has sometimes been rocky, sometimes great, sometimes fractured into which clergy person does this community affiliate with when you've had multiple clergy on staff. And I really think at the heart of this place and the true tuning fork is your faithful relationships with God and each other. And so I really wanted to turn us in that direction. And reinforce the relationship building context around creating a vision. And so that's my, putting all my cards out on the table, why I called Rachel and I said, we need to do a relational building process.
Thanks, and you'll see that in the feedback we got from you guys, there's some hard messages in some of that, so it's very important that we're intentional about doing this. Take the great with the not so great. I would like to also call out the visioning team. I know they stood up earlier, but it's Angie Richards, Annette Tinder, Clarence Harper, Dan Hubner, Jeanette O'Malley, Linda Proctor, and then me and Mother Adrian sort of fill in as the ex officio members. So we're conducting this in sort of two efforts. The first effort was a listening campaign, one-on-ones, and then small groups. And if you participated in any of that, please raise your hand. Good.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you.
Here.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yes. And then the second phase, which we're just about to embark on, in fact, we're kind of embarked on already, is the outreach to the Frederick community. And what's interesting is one of the things that we've done is identify who within the community we want to have conversations with, and the list is probably 2 to 3 dozen companies, or countries too, I guess. We want to talk to, people. So we're really, I'm excited about what that feedback might be. And you'll see this starting on page 27, so I won't pick up the specific numbers, but I felt pretty good that we talked to about 60 people, which for our church, was okay. It's probably on the low side, but it was a good cross-section, which included 33 one-on-one meetings and 5 small group meetings, and that took place over, the late last year. Say again?
I think it was like a month and a half.
Month and a half, yeah. And there's a breakdown in there, so I won't go over the demographics. But some interesting themes came out of that. First of all, one of the things, and this is Rachel really resolved this into the notes, that most people are really involved in the life at All Saints. And everybody here, and I look throughout here, I see most people here are really involved in All Saints. Obviously, you're giving up a Saturday morning to come to a church meeting, so you are involved with the parish life. But what we found out is some people have come less involved, and that happens. There's a cycle in life, and there's a cycle certainly in parish life, and people cycle in and people cycle out, and that's the cycle of life. So that's just the way things go. So some results, and again, this is in your on page 27, but I'll just highlight some of these. People are feeling that the sermons and just the general music are feeding their souls. The liturgy and outreach provide a warm welcome and deep relationship and keep people here. Many people are celebrating the growth of the parish with new families and new church energy. And many mention the gifts of the clergy as well as the other leadership. And Donna's walking around doing something. Do you want to add anything to that? No. Okay. So concerns that were raised, and I won't dwell on this any more than the last thing, is some people were concerned about the length of the worship times. Some people were concerned about the prayer grounds. Some people want music at 8 o'clock, which is one of those cycles. 5 years ago.
The alls are like, not
No.
us. No, that we didn't see that. It came out in the listening sessions. Go figure.
I will tell you that when we did a parish-wide survey, oh boy, this is probably 15 years ago, nobody went to music at 8 o'clock. So that's part of one of those life cycles. And then some people felt a bit of a disconnection between their parish life and the leadership and what's going on here. Some felt a desire for more fellowship and connection between the Sunday services. When we went from parallel services to sequential services, we lost that opportunity to engage in coffee hour. And so people are feeling a lack of fellowship. And so, and we've heard that a couple of times. Some are concerned about the older members not feeling valued. That's, part of the cycle. And as you heard from some of the tables, some concern about the sermons being a little bit too political. But then I also heard from people in our session that get over it. So that's just, no commentary, just what I heard. But people also are happy that we're engaging in social issues. And so, it's kind of hard to be a church in this day and age without getting in social issues. And then what Rachel summarized is that we seem to be experiencing some growing pains. That goes with the territory. And then some changes, again, the whole notion of change in an Episcopal church, things are different than the way they've been before, and that kind of is part of what we need to wrestle with. So and you'll see this in here, where we want to go in 5 years, generally, and this is what came out of the conversations. We want to grow the church with more members, and you saw financially how we're going to at least take care of some of that. We want to do more hands-on outreach. We've got strong intentionality around people wanting to do more with outreach. And then we want to have a robust youth program. And then from the financial priorities, and we see this now instantiated in what we're doing financially, is we need to care for the facilities. We have a campus that is over 250 years old, so we need to care for the facilities. We need to have better financial stability. Some people are concerned that although we have a strong endowment, we have a $16.6 million balance sheet, we do have financial issues. We're a church, for Christ's sake, and so that's part of that's intentional, so that's going to happen.
That's a prayer.
That's a prayer, yes. That's the only time I can say that and get away with it, but... And again, finally, we want more intentional outreach programs for spiritual relationship. So some of Rachel's recommendations were we needed a clearly articulated vision around what it means to be a fully inclusive parish. And we're hearing some of that. I think you heard from Kathy that we're going to be working this year to make our church a lot more accessible for folks that have disabilities and whatnot. And we're working with actually folks in that community to help establish some of that. And we also need to identify leaders who are bought into this vision. It doesn't help to have people that aren't bought in, because it's hard to make a vision when you have people that aren't part of that. Rachel also suggested that we could use some conflict management to help people that are experiencing some of the cultural shift. Those of us that have been here a while have been through several rectors, and at each shift in rector, there's a shift in cultural identity. And so, at this time, and we did this last time, if you remember, maybe we need a little bit of conflict management. And then a cohesive communication strategy, and I will say at the tables I was at, one of the overriding comments people had is we need better communications. And so we get it. We need to communicate better. That's why we're having a 3-hour meeting today. That's one of the ways we're doing that. So the next steps is to share this with you all and also be more intentional about making it available both on the website and other ways. Also get your feedback on the process. And so if you have any thoughts, we may have some discussions going on.
So on your table, or actually when you came in the door, you should have gotten a sheet that was a single sheet that said next steps in the visioning process. On one side of it, it outlines the dates and the next steps. And on the back side of it is a prayer practice. And I'm not going to go into that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But this gives you concrete next steps and ways that we, as a community, are going to take the material, the data, and the relationships that we're generating in this visioning process, and how your vestry leadership is going to work with that material and conversations that we're going to be ongoing having with the community to crystallize that vision. We need many ears in order to make sure the tuning fork is ringing appropriately with the string, the heartstring of this parish. I wrote a newsletter article for this month. It's like getting your eyes checked, right? You can't just do it, set it, and forget it. I mean, how many times every year I have to go get new glasses? It is no different in the church. So sitting there with your face pressed up against that machine, changing the lenses, is this better or worse? Better or worse? Those are the conversations that we need to be having to try and help us attain 2020 vision. Thank you for it being 2020. I didn't plan that, but that just happened. So anything you want to reflect on from your position?
Yeah, we got 11 more months of the 2020, so yes. Actually, the only thing I want to say, well, actually a couple things. One is that, I've been here for a while, I've been in church leadership for a while, and I've seen, the liminal time that Mother Adrian has referred to a few times, and this is one of them. So bear with it. A lot of people don't like change. I'm one of them, and I can be rather strident in my vociferousness around that, but don't take my lead on that, just kidding. Just let's work with it. Flow through it. It's okay. You've seen this reflected in the financial reporting, and you'll see it. But if you have any issues with it, come to the leadership and just let us know. I would say the doors are open. But I also would say that I'm excited about where we're going. I'm excited about what's going on both in the world that we can take advantage of and help. What's going on in the world here that we can take advantage of and help. I think that the vision that we're doing is really helpful to reinforce some of the thoughts that we've already had and help us think about other ways that we can be doing things. And so I'm looking forward to digging in and keeping going. Rachel's been great. She's going to leave us but she's going to be done shortly, and she's going to leave us with a plan that we'll need to work on. So I'm excited about working with all y'all, as Sarah says, and get started and working and making this happening both within the vestry and within the church. So I will thank everybody that's involved, even with your thoughts and prayers. We'll do this together.
So here's my reflections and what I'm asking you all to do. So we've given you this midpoint report, and there's sort of two questions. One question is about looking at the report, the data that's coming back to us. Does it reflect your sense of the life of the parish? When we look at data, I don't know about you all, but I have to turn my head, right, to look down at data or at my screen, right, and lean in to look at my screen. When we're looking at data, we're focusing in on something that's close up. We're looking at the details, and we're trying to understand if what we're reading matches what we know or what our heart tells us. That's one piece of the work that we have to do. The other piece of the work that we're doing is looking up, right? Moving our eyes away from the data in front of us and looking to the horizon. So these are two very different pieces of work. The data collection, the relationship conversations, noticing who are we, what's going on, what are the things that are happening in the life of this body. That's one piece. The other piece is now pick our chins up and look out at the horizon. Where is God calling us to go? This is hard work because if you have really strong muscles for data, your vision on the horizon might be a little difficult. If you have really great horizon vision, you might have a hard time looking up close at the data. We tend to have one of those muscles that we're stronger at, and the other one we're a little weaker at. I happen to have an astigmatism, so everything is blurry without these lenses. But when I crossed 40, right, I needed the close-up glasses. All of a sudden, I couldn't see this anymore. So what I'm trying to get us to think about is the up-close work that we've been doing. We're now shifting our gaze to look at the horizon. For some of you, that's like where that's your jam. Reverend Jess said that the other day. That's your jam. But for others of you, you're going to be like, oh, but the data, right? So it's going to be a little bit of that in the community back and forth, and especially as we begin to do the conversations out in the wider neighborhood. These are some of the things that I'm recognizing. When I look at the data, and also my 3.5 years of getting to know all of you, there is an internal tension in this community between who we've been and who we are. There's a sense of grief about I think it was Randy Query who said when I was in the search process for becoming your rector, we have a trophy case, but we can't live there, right? We can't pull out that trophy and say, this is what we are. No, this is where we were. Now, where are we headed? The last 3 years have been a lot of conversation about what is it that's at the heart of this place, what's the soul of this place. We have some really wonderful trophies and ways in which you all have been incredibly impactful in the life of Frederick and in building up a community and having youth groups and children's programs and a music ministry, and like all of these things. Now the question is, who are we today and where are we headed? There are some inherent tensions that have been arising. In the last year, we had 118 new people come to All Saints. 118. I see some of them here now. 118 new people is a lot. Now, the question is, how do we incorporate them into the body of this place? And if any of you have ever had a younger sibling born into your family, those of you who have already found your pew and know how cushy that place is for your bum are going to feel a little displaced when someone new comes in and unknowingly sits in your seat. Or takes a leadership role that you used to inhabit. Or leads the congregation in a direction that you're like, wait, we didn't know. So what's happening in the life of this community, and I've been feeling it, is there's two communities developing. Those who have arrived in the last 5 to 8 years, and everybody else. There are great bridge people in this community to help bridge that relational divide. That's why I wanted us to do the visioning process. But we need to be aware of the ways in which we are challenged to be one body. We tend to dump it on the worship services, 8, 9, and 11, and 6, and I don't know those people and I never see them. But I think a deeper truth is around the identity of this parish and who really holds the identity. Who are the ones that are claiming the heartstring of this place? And do we know each other and do we trust each other? And that's only work that you all can do. And it comes to us sometimes in generational issues. How are we a community that doesn't just make space for children, but incorporates them into the life of the body? If we want to grow in that direction, which is one of the things that got named in the visioning process, we have to be in relationship with the children in our parish. More than just, isn't it cute to see them every once in a while? We need to know them, and they need to know us. Otherwise, they won't stick around. I'm coming to you this morning from having spent the last evening, and I will go back this afternoon, and I'll go back tomorrow to the Happening Retreat. That's our high school youth retreat that's happening at Claggett right now. There are over 70 teenagers, 9th through 12th grade. Their theme, I brought a dinosaur. Their theme is the Jurassic Park theme, and I brought it, and someone said to me, are you taking that to your annual meeting? And they said, they might get the wrong idea. I said, no, the church is not a dinosaur, because we know that trajectory, right? Extinction. No, the church is an incredibly vibrant, living body of Christ. And the teenagers that I've been spending the last evening with, and will spend this afternoon and evening with, are an experience of that life and the ways in which their faith and their lives are being nurtured and grown in their parishes, ours included. So that's just one slice of our identity. We have to continue to do that work and figure it out. It's around music. It's around outreach. It's around fellowship. It's around everything that we do. Where are the places where we need deeper relationships, deeper faith, deeper connections? And so I want you all to be doing that work of looking down at the data and then pop your chin up to the horizon. Where do we need to go that we haven't imagined yet? What's God planting in your heart that might be an idea, a possibility, an imagination? And don't edit yourself, right? I mean, that's that couldn't possibly happen. You never know. With God, all things are possible. And so on the back side of the sheet, where did that go? Oh, next steps. On the back side of your next steps, and this is also at the end of my rector's report, so at the back side is a way to cultivate stillness and to listen. So I give you a little description of what it means to take a little centering prayer practice. It could be 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever time you've got. Take a moment and ask this open-ended statement. I imagine God's dream for all saints is. Don't you answer it right away. Let God take your imagination for a little journey and see what you begin to imagine. Maybe you'll get a glimpse of it in the prayer. Maybe later in the day, you'll go, oh, that's it. That's a great idea. You all are the ones that are going to begin to fine-tune that lens, that know the soul of this place, and through whom we will begin to hear God's voice. And then there's a little closing prayer, a prayer of self-dedication. I call it the most dangerous prayer, because if you prayed that and it really came true, your life would change. And then there's a little process. This is community discernment. It's something we really started 3 years ago with Listening Hearts in 2017, and we've been on this journey for a while. I really am proud of the vestry and the leadership that we have continued to work in this way. And I just invite you into this process. And we will continue these meetings to be able on March 18th, the 25th, April 1st, April 22nd. So those meetings are opportunities for us to begin to share out what is God planting in your heart? What do you see on the horizon? Where is it that we are being led? And your vestry will be helping to make those decisions and to chart a course for us.
Thank you. Oh, you're already you don't have to worry about that. Thank you. So these are drawn from the index cards, and for some, these are from the index cards that were passed around, and I tried to summarize them. If I have mischaracterized anybody's that you don't see yours in there, or I've misinterpreted it, jump up. I did have a little trouble deciphering some of the writing, no offense. I know it was hurried, but I'm going to go through. These are not in any particular order. I haven't had a chance to sort of organize them, but I did try to put the like comments together, either with the same theme. I will note that in some cases we have opposite opinions, and I will note those as we go. First of all, again, not in any particular order, the 5-year plan is great, and like that there's now vestry buy-in to the plan, whatever plan we come up with. Like the idea that a contingency plan accompanied the main plan to show that it's more practical. The plan is ambitious but seems realistic. However, we need to be flexible, need to continue innovating ideas for generating revenue. Focusing on pledge and plate is the way to go, and we need to be proactive in facilities maintenance. However, I also found comments of the $50K per year is a big ask, and depending so heavily on such a significant increase in pledges only is problematic. So I think that ties in with need to look at other ways to generate revenue. Another theme is what specific things are we going to do to get the additional pledges? The concept is great, but we need more specifics around what we will do. Increasing dependency on aging congregation who has limited income sources is not a good idea. So that goes to not depending solely on the existing pledgers. Seeing the breakdown of sample pledge amounts was helpful. It also illustrates that you can always add more even if you are auto-deducting. And not only was there a question about what specific things are we going to do to get additional pledges, but what specific things are we going to do to carry out other elements of the plan. And then a few more here. Bear with me. We need to research why, emphasizing why we are losing pledgers and members. In particular, what happened to people that used to pledge and left, and was there a reason they left that was not related to, let's say, moving, et cetera. And then the past pledgers who are still here who reduced their amounts or didn't pledge at all. What happened? Why was that? What can we do to fix that? We need to include building repairs in our budget. There were a couple comments relative to facilities rental, trying to get more revenue in on facilities, and then paying off the mortgage is great no matter what. Also had the converse of that, paying off the mortgage and drawing on the endowment. There were multiple questions about why pay off a 3% mortgage with endowment money that was growing at a typical rate of 8%. There's wanting to know about what's the delta between the return on the endowment money and the cost of the mortgage, sort of a similar question. Why reduce the endowment draw to only 4%?